I tell entrepreneurs all the time, don't stop publicizing what you're going to do. Stop telling all of your friends and your family, oh, I'm gonna go do this, like blowing the bugle, like you're just about to make some, proclamation. Just get to work and do it. And when people ask you, what are you doing? I'm doing this. And when they say like, oh, you can't do that, or they do something else, just know that you're the one that did it and they're the ones that didn't. So say, yeah, I hear you, nod your head and move on with your life.
Welcome to this week's episode of Zero to a Million, brought to you by Unstack. I'm your host, Zach Rego, and today I'm joined by Ryan Deiss, founder and CEO of the Scalable company, along with another company you may have heard of, and actually how I started partnering with Ryan and his team, a digital marketer. Ryan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Zach.
So I do want to get to the origin story, but tell us a little bit about Scalable and the companies that potentially fall under that.
Yeah, sure. So the Scalable company is the name of our holding company that represents our interest in all of our other, underlying portfolio groups. So digitalmarketer.com, which how we originally affiliated is one of our brands. We just launched a new one at scalable.co. We've got some new ones coming out, in that area. And I've always struggled with entrepreneurial ADHD. And so for me, just focusing on one business is never, it's not really good for me. It's not really good for anybody else either. And so I, yeah, so I, so I basically that's kind of what we're doing. And it's what I've always done, I know we're going to talk about kind of how digital marketer happened, but I've always had multiple things going on. And for me, it's had a way of working. So yeah, so this is the newest embodiment. We just kind of launched it really this year.
I think we'll probably get into a little bit of this, but you know, I love how transparent you are with some of your LinkedIn posts where you're like, I had to fire myself and here's why. And then, you have a bunch of these posts. I feel like once a week you've got one that you're either like being hard on yourself or you're being transparent about something that a mistake you made. And it makes, I don't know, makes me feel good because not to make me
Yeah.
happy because you're struggling, but it's true. Like it resonates quite a bit. And I love it's good that you're spreading yourself out across a bunch to not be so focused on one because that can be detrimental. That's a good thing to think about.
Yeah. Again, it works for me. Most people will tell you that you need to focus. And I think for most people that's probably right. And I will say if I didn't have a lot of help, so I couldn't have this structure if it were just me. And so I mean a big mistake that I see entrepreneurs make is they do spread themselves too thin. I focus in the areas that I'm good at, and fortunately I'm at a position now to where we've been able to have a solid team to execute across a lot of these different brands, and that's the only way that it works. So I've never say to somebody, "Hey, go start 10 things at once." That's a terrible idea. But I will say that you need to be thoughtful about what it is that you're good at as a founder, and also acknowledge the things that you aren't good at. And there's going to be seasons where you say, you know what, Scott, I need to suck it up, power through, and like do these things even if I'm not good at it and I don't like it, because that's what being a founder is, right? I mean, like it means if you look around and there's nobody on your team to do that job, that's called your job, right? But it doesn't mean you have to stay there forever. And that's what I try to tell founders. Like, you don't get to absolve yourself from it because I'm not good at it. No, cry me a river, right? You signed up for this. That's like somebody being like, oh, I wasn't ready to be a parent. It's like, and yet here you go, right?
Yeah.
There's some kids, so I've lived that one too. You hope
Yeah.
you're ready now.
My first diaper was my son's first diaper. Like
Same,
that's the
same. I've
first
never done
diaper
it.
I ever changed. I was not
I don't know how
doing
to do
any
this.
diaper changes.
Same kind of thing. But you'll also have a lot of entrepreneurs who will stay in this same cycle of doing stuff because they always have. And so the reality is it's both, right? It's both acknowledging, and I think it's about being intentional and learning your skills in the areas that you're good at and sticking to those. For me, I like the vision. I like the company building part. I don't necessarily enjoy the company running part beyond a certain point. And so that's kind of, we built an organization that allows for that.
That's interesting. And you've almost always been an entrepreneur. Let's start with, I think college. What were you building then and how are you finding ways to make money
Yeah, I mean, so
legally?
yeah,
I don't need any of the
it's all
outside
been legal.
businesses. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
thankfully
good.
it's all been legal. Yeah, so in college, started college in 1999, and Yeah, I like to tell a story. I met a girl my freshman year, and I was like, "This is probably the girl I'm going to marry." Funny enough, and look, I didn't like set out to get married young or anything like that. It just, I don't know, I felt it, right? And I didn't tell her that. By the way, I like to say that'd be a little creepy to tell her, but I just had this sense, right? Like this is probably the one, and that just kind of started my brain on thinking of all this stuff. Like, okay, so you're poor right now, and that's okay because you're a broke college kid. That's fine. But eventually you need to buy a ring. And those are expensive. And then you do that, like you're gonna like need to have a house, and like then there's gonna be kids. And my brain was like, holy crap, I need money. And I had, I was going to school on, went to University of Texas, so great school, but a state school. Like, so I was on grants and scholarships. I had a part-time job to cover the other stuff. Like, I was getting by. Certainly wasn't stacking cash. And I was like, I need to figure something out. And so it was 1999, kind of at the peak of the first dot-com boom. I was like, maybe I'll start an internet company. I didn't know how to do that, but I figured if I could get a job at one, maybe I could earn some stock options. So I asked everybody I knew. Um, Anybody hiring in a dot com? That's what we called it back then. Now they're called like startups. We used to call them dot coms. Um, and that through a friend of a friend of a friend, they're like, yeah, there's this company of yours hiring someone. They're hiring a web designer. So I went and interviewed. They said, do you know how to design websites? I said, yes, I do, which was not true. But I figured I was interviewing on a Thursday. At best, they wouldn't have me start until Monday. I could learn over the weekend, and that's what happened. That's what I did. Um, and this company, they did email marketing for an early email marketing company. Had really cool clients like InStyle Magazine, a lot of publishers who were looking to build their email lists. And I primarily was designing little landing pages for this company. And what was interesting is um, I didn't know everybody was designing these like fancy, swirly Flash landing pages. I didn't know how to do that. So mine were just these simple, like there was a table with a headline at the top and a subheadline and a form with a button. And nobody liked my designs, but nobody could argue with the fact that I was able to generate more opt-ins for our clients than anybody else. So they kept me around. Well, that company wound up going out of business. So my stock options, as they so often do, went to zero. And I began marketing myself as a web designer. That was my first company, was as a web designer. And the only client I could get was a lactation consultant, which if you don't know, lactation consultants, generally women who help nursing moms breastfeed with the breastfeeding process. Again, I've got 4 kids, super hip to all this stuff right now. At 19 years old, it was awkward. It was awkward, like building this thing. But what was cool is this woman, my client, was very, very, very insightful. She said, my clients, once I've taught them how to do it, and certainly once their children have weaned, they don't need me anymore. So I want to really pivot from just doing lactation consulting to doing early childhood nutrition. And so she wanted to produce this book on how to make your own baby food. And so I helped her do that. Right, I helped her like do the research and all the other stuff. Got my friends who are English majors to produce this PDF book that she wanted to have print and sell. Really, really insightful stuff. Well, the economy crashes, and her husband winds up losing his job. She's got to go back to work to help support. Says like, hey, I can't pay you for this website, but you were so helpful. It helped me create this book. I want you to have this book on how to make your own baby food, kind of as payment. To which I'm thinking, thank you for absolutely nothing. I did all of this work, and what I had to show for it is a freaking PDF book on how to make baby food. So I signed up for a while. I, was grumpy, and how am I going to make rent and all this other stuff. And I started just saying, like, what could I do with this? Right? I bet other people are interested in this. So this was kind of before Google was a big thing, but you could go on like Alta Vista and all these things and figure out how many people were searching. I was like, wow, how to make your own baby food is getting a lot of searches. I went and did some research, like there's nobody with a book on it. And so I wrote myself a simple, ugly, one-page um, sales page with like a headline at the top, some brief copy, order button at the bottom. And I was like, I'm going to charge $14 for this PDF download. Um, and I remember, and I was like, I bet I can get it to rank, because it was easy back then, right? And so sure enough, within a couple of days, I was ranking in the top 3 in most of the search engines for how to make your own baby food recipes, all this other stuff. And every day, like clockwork, I'd make 5 to 10 sales. Now, 5 to 10 sales at $14 a pop was called all the money in the world. Um, And then I thought to myself, what if I had 10 of these? What if I had 100 of these? And by the time I graduated from college, that's without kind of thinking about it this way. I had this little digital publishing empire. And I still remember to this day, like somebody telling me, you can't sell PDFs. Nobody will pay for that. Like, I know thousands of people that have. So, but it's funny, and this is why I tell entrepreneurs, be really careful who you listen to and be really careful who you talk to your ideas about. Because I didn't talk to anybody about this. I didn't even tell my roommates I was doing it. I just did it. Right? I just did it. And it worked, and so I kept doing it. Once I was doing it, people were like, hey, how are you able to like pick up lunch? I told them what I was doing. And then everybody told me that I couldn't do it. Had they told me that I couldn't do it before I did it, I might have believed them.
Yeah.
I
I
might
mean,
have believed them. And so I
not
tell
many
entrepreneurs all
college
the time,
kids selling baby recipe books though. Like that's a crazy one.
yeah, but I mean that was my first start. It was all just customer centric. But I tell entrepreneurs all the time, don't like stop publicizing what you're going to do. Stop telling all of your friends and your family, oh, I'm gonna go do this, like blowing the bugle like you're just about to make some, proclamation. Just get to work and do it. And when people ask you, what are you doing? I'm doing this. And when they say like, "Oh, you can't do that," or they do something else, just know that you're the one that did it, and they're the ones that didn't. So say, "Yeah, I hear you," nod your head, and move on with your life. But that's how I got started. Literally, that was how I got started. I wish I could say that that little business was all rainbows and fairy tales. I mean, it did. I definitely had its ups and downs, but that sowed the seeds of literally everything that I've ever done. And when I graduated, by the way, I did indeed make enough money to buy the ring to propose to the girl. I mean, I have those, 4 kids today, been married for 16, 17 years. I should know exactly, but I'm bad at math. Um, you know, but yeah, I mean, so that's kind of how the whole thing got started. Trying to design a website for a lactation consultant that couldn't pay me.
I that book could still be making money today. Is the site still up and running? I feel like the Taking Care of Babies book is like people are downloading that online and stuff. Like there's got to be let's get that book back online.
Yeah, well, I think the equivalent of that book today would probably now be a blog post and a
Yeah.
YouTube video. The game
That's
has changed a little bit. Standards have been increased just a bit. Look, I benefited a lot from being early. I won't
yeah,
deny that, nor will I apologize for it. I did ultimately sell that along with a number of other businesses to other people, and so
that's
I did
awesome.
really well and sold to them, and they did well for a season. Um, and that's kind of always been my model: like build it up, get it going, get bored with it, sell it to somebody else. So
So let's dig in a little bit. You told me this story. I forget when or where. I think it might have been the first time we met, about like the napkin, or you kind of drew out a little bit of a marketing plan, and you guys at Digital Marketer, the team at Digital Marketer has always done an amazing job of uh, one presenting the ideas in a very easy way to like follow and kind of these flow charts. And when I see the picture on your site of like what you drew out, it's like, oh, that's almost identical. It's got colors now and it's on the internet,
right.
but it's the same thing. Take me through that story a little bit because I think it's super interesting.
Yeah, so that predates Digital Marketer by quite a bit, actually. Yeah, Digital Marketer was started as a side project. Again, I'm happy to share that. Almost nothing I've done. If there's one thing we get from this, almost nothing I've done has been that strategic or intentional. I've simply followed my customers where they were going. It's like, oh, you're over here now? Cool, I'm with you too. I never defined any business that I've ever owned by the product that I sold or the way that I sold it. So I never did that. I think that's again, a really big mistake that entrepreneurs make is they're like, I'm in this business. Like, I'm in the business of my customers and I'll follow them. Their taste change, then take what I was selling, you know, take it out back, throw it in the dumpster. But now, I mean, the story that you're talking about. So I'll kind of pick up. So launched my first business, made my first sale online in 1999. Graduated in 2003, got married the weekend after. And from like 2003, 2004, um, things were pretty great. Like, I mean, I was doing really, really well. I was clipping along, making good money, and then something happened kind of in and around the end of 2004, 2005. Google did their first major algorithm update. And literally everything back then that I was doing was based on SEO. It was all based on search rankings, all organic. And I remember waking up one day, and the first thing that would do is check my sales because it was so predictable, right? It was just this predictable, like tick, tick, tick. And I saw them, I was like, wow, sales are really low, like terrifyingly, like what's going on? So I assume that something's broken. Maybe a server went down. What's going on? Check, check, check. Can't find it. That day goes by. I'm still, maybe it'll come back the next day, even worse. Next day, zero. Okay, something's wrong. Let me make sure that I can still find the site. So I went to do a Google and I couldn't find it. And I did some more research, like, oh, they just rolled out the what was known as the Florida update. And all my sites, because they were deemed low quality, because again, simple little one-page websites, basic sales letter, not doing anything. At that time, Google was mega over indexing for these big sites with tons of content because they were rolling out their AdSense program, and mine just did not fit the bill, right? They didn't provide value. And in retrospect, they didn't. They were sales pages. That was it. And so gone. And so I spent about a year. I said, that's it. I'm done with SEO. I'm done with organic. I need to control it. So around that same time, pay-per-click came out and started really getting big. So Google AdWords, now it's just Google Ads, was out. It's like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to figure out how to make it work where I buy my traffic. Because if I'm buying it, then I'll have some control. Can't take that away from me. Well, that's comical, and it's because they shut down people left and right anyway. But that was my belief. So I took a year to try to figure out this whole process of buying advertising. And it took me about a year, and it got me about $250,000 in debt. And I'll never forget. I was going and trying to buy some ads, and my credit card was getting declined, and I was in such denial about it that I didn't even look in my bank account or my bank statement or my credit card stuff anymore. Back then, again, this was pre-financial crisis. If you could fog a mirror, you could get a $100,000 signature line of credit. You just called up your bank, said, "Hey, I'd like a line of credit." Something like Wells Fargo and Bank of America, they gave me all these lines of credit, right, that I'm spending against. And right about the time I thought I was kind of figuring it out, I realized I was $250,000 in debt and I had no more credit. Like I had fully exhausted everything that I had. And I realized this while I happened to be in Dallas at an event, and this realization kind of hit me. And so I decided to feel sorry for myself, and I went to the lobby bar, and I started just pounding something I'm sure terrible, like I don't know, something like Jack and Coke or something with
Yeah.
all the sugar in the
Hopefully something
world.
cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Something cheap with a lot of sugar, so it's like terrible on all ends. And I remember thinking like I'm done. I'm gonna have to file bankruptcy, and I'm gonna need to go try to find a job, which for me was terrifying because I hadn't really had one of those. And I was like, that's what I'm gonna do. And for some reason, this conversation just popped into my head that I'd had with another entrepreneurial friend of mine, and we were also just at a bar hanging out talking, and he made a comment. He held up like one of the bar napkins, and he said, "Isn't it funny how many great business ideas have been launched on just one of these?" And we just kind of talked about, yeah, there's probably something to the simplicity, the constraint around how small it is, forces your ideas. And we had a conversation, and then it just went away, and we started talking about something else. In that moment, for some reason, that conversation popped back into my mind, and it was as vivid as if I was experiencing it. I mean, it's like this kind of weird, I won't say like spiritual type thing, but it really was a weird, visceral kind of moment. And I thought about that conversation. I looked up, and there was a stack of bar napkins right in front of me. Not, cocktail napkins, not nothing strange. I was, after all, sitting at a bar, but I remember looking at it, and I said to myself, I said, Ryan, um, you're going to sit here, and you're going to figure out how to fix this. And the only thing that you have is that bar napkin. That's going to be the constraint. And if you can't figure out how to fix it using just that bar napkin, then you're going to go to bed. You're going to wake up the next morning. You're going to confess all of your horrible financial sins to your wife. She didn't know about any of this, by the way. She had no idea how in debt we were or anything. And you're going to file bankruptcy, and you're going to go looking for work. And if you can't fix it, then you're going to work that plan and only that plan, and until you get yourself out of this. And so I did. And I thought, I was like, of all the stuff I've been doing, what's been working? And I drew up this like very, very simple kind of 5-step, what we would now people would call a sales funnel, right? I'm going to run an ad to bring people into an to bring people into an email list, offer them a lead magnet so they opt in, immediately offer them a higher value item for a low dollar. If they buy that, then I'll offer them a bigger version of that item. If they don't buy those things, then I'll put them in a follow-up series to buy the thing you didn't buy. That was it. And literally, it was like the most simple flow chart ever. But I looked at it, I was like, this is it. Like, this is it. I'm only going to do this. I had about 80 different websites up selling different things. I culled it down to just the 6 that were actually really profitable, put all the focus there. And within that year, I didn't really make any money, but I had fully got myself out of debt. I was broke. Felt really good. And that same kind of plan is what I've been, leveraging to this day. It kind of formed the foundation of, again, of digital marketer and all the other stuff. So long
Yeah.
story,
So
but hopefully some
no,
people
no, I
get
love
some
that
value from it.
story. No, I love that story. And I think you're totally right on the napkin piece. It's interesting to think about it in the context of, you know, you only have X amount of space to work with it, which simplifies ideas and makes them probably more achievable, right? And the in the context of a napkin shape, and that's the size you have to work with. Um, when you go into digital marketer, I think a lot of that framework I think is similar to the content I've engaged with from digital marketer. Take us through kind of what you've built there and who you're providing, insights and strategies for.
Yeah, so once we got things turned back around, and again, in that time, it was just me. I didn't have any employees during that entire season, and so throughout the bulk of 2006, most of 2007, it was really just getting stuff kind of back on track, like getting back to where I was before, but diversifying my traffic strategies. And we eventually got good at SEO again, figured that out, added in the paid side, began really professionalizing our systems a little bit better. Um, and I started actually like hiring some folks in 2007 and 2008 because we were growing and we were profitable. And I was actually figuring out how to run, a business from and just basic cash flow stuff. I didn't know how any of this stuff worked. I didn't know how to pay taxes. I didn't know how much you're supposed to set aside for how to make sure that you get your payroll stuff covered. I didn't know any of this stuff worked. So all of that kind of got figured out through 2006, 2007, 2008. The organization began to grow, hired some folks. 2009, we really took off, and we were adding new properties very, very quickly. And I found that my biggest constraint was, well, 2 things. One, it was cash. Like, so I needed cash to go and start because some of these companies that we were starting were they weren't digital products; they were physical products, consumer goods. We were actually starting to do importing and things like that. It's like this is getting to be a bit more capital intensive. And the second constraint that we had was marketing talent. And so I thought, okay, this is cool. I can actually kill 2 birds with 1 stone. If I teach what we're doing, if I share kind of what we're doing, I can sell that. And that'll create some capital to go and launch these things, but it'll also allow me to get paid to produce internal training on marketing. And I had done this forever. Like, I'd always done stuff and taught it and talked about it, but it was a very one-off thing. I'll release a little course over here. I'll release a little book over here. I never thought about it like a business. And this time, starting off with, didn't think about it like a business either. And so we did that for a couple of years, and then I remember we decided, hey, let's do this event, Traffic and Conversion Summit. I think that was back in, oh gosh, I think the first one was in 2008. So it was right around that same time when we were beginning to do training, because it was like, oh yeah, we'll have our team there. We'll train them on marketing stuff. We'll have our friends come in. We'll get people to pay. We lost so much money that first year. I didn't know how events worked. I was like, I did like a lot of people. It's like you go and you count the room and think about how much people paid to be in there. Like, they made $1 billion. So you realize that coffee's like $120 a gallon.
Right.
Anyway, that's a different animal. So we do Traffic Conversion Summit, selling kind of one-off products. The model's sort of working. Next year comes around, do Traffic and Conversion Summit again. And the only reason we did Traffic and Conversion Summit the second year was because we sold tickets at TNC1 for TNC2, because on the third day I got the hotel bill and I was like, we're screwed. So we're doing it again. We were so excited after TNC2 because it had grown. It's like, we're doing it again, TNC3. And I remember at TNC3, Traffic Conversion Summit, the third one, in Austin. This was, I want to say 2011. Um, Looking around and saying there was like 800 something people in the room and thinking, this is a thing. This is a thing. This is like a business. We've got a decent product line. We've got a large list. We've got an event. We should start treating this like a business. And so it was actually at the third Traffic and Conversion Summit that we launched and said, we are now officially digitalmarketer.com. And so Digital Marketer as a brand was, launched in, I think 2012. It's actually not as old as a lot of people think. It's certainly not as old as Traffic and Conversion Summit is, but it all started as just, I've got this need. We need capital. We need to train people. Let's bring these things together. And then, oops, you know, everything I've done, it's been the classic kind of, we call them accidental entrepreneurs. And that was definitely an accidental entrepreneurial journey.
And that business is still going. You did a traffic conversions this year, virtual.
Yep.
I'd love your thoughts on that because you've got a significant amount of experience on in-person events and scaling traffic and conversions to, geez, I don't know how many people attended the last one I attended. Had to have been 15 or 20,000. I don't
It
know,
was
but
actually, I think the last one that we did in 2019 was only around 8,000 because we
okay,
got capped out by the hotel.
right.
TNC in 2020 was going to be more along those lines, but we got capped out by a pandemic.
That's what
But
it was.
yes,
You were moving to the convention center,
right,
and we
right,
we had signed up for that one.
right.
Take me through the transition on events and honestly where you think events are going. I think that's super interesting. I think I'm starting to think about marketing budget for the second half of the year, and I'm like, hey, we should try to get involved in events now. I think there's potentially an opportunity, but I'd love your take on that.
Yeah. So I mean, I think events are gonna come back fast and with a fury. I think people are ready to get back in it. Everybody's still waiting a bit. So I think towards the end of the third quarter, and definitely by the fourth quarter, you maybe won't see it back to 100% like it was before because there'll still be some folks. I mean, with events, you're planning further out, and so you know, asking some folks now, like we're doing this right now. We're beginning to sell tickets to TNC 2021, which is going to be in September. And there's lots of folks right now who are like, I definitely want to come as long as I can get vaccinated, as long as this, and all the as long as, the experts generally agree will all be true. But there's a lot of folks that it still is like, ooh, I don't know. So I think that kind of the third and fourth quarter are going to be a great opportunity for both attendees and exhibitors because the people that are there are going to be so excited and there's not going to be as much noise. Um, I think by 2022, assuming we don't have another COVID-19, right? I think that events are going to be back where they were kind of 2018, 2019, and even a little bit more. We did do a virtual event. I think there's absolutely a place for virtual events, but they're different. They're absolutely different, and they're different because it's kind of the same thing I said before. You can only have really one audience, and when when you're doing a live event and you're live streaming a live event, the people who are there live are feeling the experience. They feel like they're in the room, and the people that are watching the live stream, they're like, I'm watching a live stream. If you know, it, when we switched it and said this is going to be a virtual first event, nobody in the audience. What that meant was I'm now looking into the camera, and so are all of our speakers, right? Which means that if you're there watching at home, I'm looking in your eyes, like right now, right? Right now, I'm not looking at your face. I'm looking at the dot at the top of my laptop. If I look at your face like I'm doing right now I'm not making eye contact anymore, right? And it's the same kind of thing. So I think that virtual events will have a place in the broader ecosystem. I think there will be both. But and what I loved about TNC this year is there were lots of people who had never been to TNC, and this was their first one because they said in the past I didn't know if I could make the trip. It was expensive. I didn't know if it'd be worth it. Now that I've gone, I'm absolutely going to make the trip live. So I think virtual allows you to capture an audience that you wouldn't have, that you can either convert to the live experience, or that you will just have here that would never travel in that. Maybe they're in a different part of the world. But this idea that it's going to be a hybrid model, I don't buy. I don't buy. I think you only ever have one customer base. And where I learned this, where this crystallized for me, was with my son. So my oldest son is about turned 15, and at his school, um, obviously all of last year, during post COVID, they were totally virtual, right? Completely virtual school. And this year, um, they went back in, did distancing as a private school, so they're able to do some cool stuff that a lot of the public schools couldn't. But if anybody in the class had any exposure, then the entire class, um, that or the whole row or something like that would be sent home. And so one day that happened. He was fine. Wound up being totally negative. But I asked him, I was like, "How was it being back in virtual school?" Because he loved it. He's an introvert. He was loving life with school being virtual. He was one of the kids that loved it. And so I was like, "Hey, was it kind of nice being back doing virtual?" And he's like, "Actually, it wasn't. I felt like the teacher was just kind of ignoring me." What do you mean? She's like, "Well, there was other people in the class, and so our teachers would talk to people in the class, but like I just felt like I was getting ignored." And I thought it was interesting. He said, "I felt like I was getting ignored." His experience was in the singular, right? So if I'm looking into a camera at, in the case of TNC this last time, literally 10,000 people, their experience is I'm looking directly at them, which means if I'm not looking directly at them, the inverse is also true. I am ignoring them, right? If you're in a crowded room, you don't expect the speaker to make direct eye contact with you. You're still a part of the experience. The expectation change. So I was like, that gets it. So I think it's going to be a part of the event stack, but I don't believe we're going to see this hybrid that is overly effective. I think we'll still live stream events for the people who can't come. I think that's fine. But to call it a hybrid event, I'm not buying it. And I certainly don't think it's the case that nobody's going to come to events after that. Our data and everything that we're seeing is absolutely proving that out. Even in Europe, yeah, we sold Traffic and Conversion Summit. I think you know this at the end of 2018 to Clarion Events, which is the second largest event management company in the world, and they've been a great partner. That event would not have made it through this season if it weren't with them, and we still own a nice stake and still handle all the programming and stuff. So it truly is a partnership. But because of them, we got some good data, and their data would suggest they own 4,000 plus events. Their data would suggest that events are going to come back. They're going to come back quickly, um, and they're going to be great.
And you know, you mentioned the virtual or the hybrid approach, and you guys have done, even in your office. I did the agency training day a few years ago, and it's funny. I think the immediacy of impact of the in person event versus the virtual event. So to elaborate on that, I walked away from the event with maybe 10 contacts from the people that were sitting in the audience of maybe 40 people in that little room.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
And of those 10 contacts, I think 5 or 6 of them turn into really meaningful partnerships or deals for me. I'm still in touch with a bunch of them. Um, and then I think there's kind of the long tail of the people that attended virtually. Like some of them, trickled in over time and would reference that video or still reference that video today. But like you're so right, like the immediate, like emotional impact you can have on people when you're presenting to them live is totally different than kind of the people that are watching online and how they're impacted by what you're presenting. Same
yeah. Well,
content.
and check this out though, because you had that experience, right? So the way that we would do it for our internal workshops, whether it was for our agency partners or for our members, is we had that hybrid model. Had done it this way for years. People were in our studio, they're attending, and then other people were able to watch it live virtually. And we always did NPS of the people there versus the people live. And not surprisingly, the net promoter score, the satisfaction score, was considerably higher for the people who were there live than it was. And we're like, okay, it makes sense. They're there, they're closer, they're getting the other experience. It makes sense. Well, when COVID happened, there was no live, there was only virtual. So what happened? Now, instead, our speakers are looking into the camera. Instantly, the NPS scores of the virtual matched what it was previously for the live. That told me something. Also, from a sales perspective, it told me something. So it's not. I still believe that person to person, face to face is going to outperform virtual. If nothing else, there's greater commitment and consistency on the part of the receiver. But I think that it has way more to do with who are you talking to, who's your audience, and I think people. My at that time 14-year-old son was intuitive enough to say, I just felt like I was being ignored. That told me everything I needed to know.
Hmm. So very, very interesting. Ryan, this has been incredibly insightful and really awesome stories. Last question we ask every guest. That's really important. Two books you recommend for every founder. I know you're, I think, a two, three-time author, so you can't recommend your own books. Um,
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't recommend mine over some of the other ones that are out there. God dang. Um, Asking me to recommend 2 books is like asking me like who are my favorite children. All right. So I think number 1 would probably have to be The Goal by Eli Goldratt.
okay,
And I love The Goal. It's a book that was written in the 80s. It's primarily a book about manufacturing efficiency and theory of constraints. And it's written in kind of a narrative format. So it's a thick book, but it's a fun read. And the basic idea is that you've got this factory worker and or factory manager, and he's trying to increase and improve the efficiency. And kind of the prevailing wisdom is, you figure if you got this factory line, and there's like 8 work centers in this. So the widget comes over here, you bolt this other widget to this widget, you got this thing, and then it moves down the line. So the prevailing wisdom in manufacturing is you want each of those work centers to be as efficient as possible, right? So if work center number 1 can crank out 12 widgets an hour, then by God, it should crank out 12. If work center number 2 can crank out 20, then it should crank out 20. If work center number 3 can crank out 8, it should crank out 8. Or number 4, like so, and on down the line. What Eli Goldratt's big observation was is that um, any process flow only should be as efficient as its least efficient area, and what the goal needs to be is to increase the efficiency of the least efficient, right? That's the bottleneck. And so I read this, and it's talking about manufacturing efficiency, and I thought to myself as a marketer, um, we're manufacturing customers. So I need to first visualize what is our manufacturing flow, right? And that's where the idea of the customer value journey came from. Was it starts at awareness, goes to engagement, subscribe. Like, so step number 1 needs to be, I've got to map my flow, and then I need to figure out which one of these stages are they getting stuck. And screw everything else, I want to optimize that. And so I think it's good to read even if you're not in manufacturing, because this idea of optimizing for the bottleneck first, I think impacts literally every single business. So that'd be number 1. Um, and number 2, I would say Ogilvy on advertising. I think you just still have to be able to write copy. I when I've gotten into serious trouble, I got out because I can write an offer. I can write copy. And I think that Ogilvy on advertising, there's some other ones that I think are maybe better, like in terms of they're more in depth, but like they're also denser, and I wouldn't send it to somebody first. Ogilvy on advertising, a close third would be The Wizard of Ads. The Wizard of Ads. So if you can let me have a 2.5, The Wizard of Ads would be up there as well.
I think those are all new to our list. We've gone, I think, 30 episodes, 2 to 3, sometimes 4 recommendations per guest. Sometimes we don't get all new ones. I did another podcast recording this morning, and he gave me a Kevin Hart book, The Comedian. So we're going all over the place now, but you can find wisdom everywhere.
It's everywhere, and I love books. I would encourage everybody read books. If you're not a reader, listen to them on Audible to decide if you should read it. And if it's good, though, get the real thing and really just study it and power through it. So
Yeah, I don't know. Have you checked out the app Blink?
I have, yeah. Blink is
Blinkist
another
or
good
Blinkist?
way.
Yeah.
Yeah, Blinkist. So that to me, it's a good way to find out, is it worth diving
Yep.
into the book itself?
Yeah.
So this idea that like I'm going to skim or I'm going to speed read or I'm going to listen at like 2 and 3x speed or I'm going to do one of these review things, you're going to miss it, right? You got to really study this stuff. It's like just reading the Cliffs Notes in school. You might get a C on the test, but you ain't going to ace that
That's
sucker.
that's how I
And
got through
in
college.
business, it's a zero sum game. We got to ace this stuff. We got to
Yeah.
know the material. So I think it's worth doing it to see if it's worth reading right now for the time. But beyond that, like go deep,
Yeah,
study it.
that was my process is listen on Blinkist and then, okay, I'm gonna go buy this and dig in deep. I tried Audible, but I just couldn't retain everything I needed to.
Yeah, I can't either, and I'm an audio guy, but I like the idea of I'll listen and then I'll read, and I'll kind of continue listening passively while I'm reading the book, and invariably it's like I don't remember that section, and so I'll go back like, oh crap, there it is, that was really good. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of both, but if I don't read it, like my work processes now, I've got the Kindle version. I'll do the dual screen on my iPad Pro. So I've got the Kindle version on one side, and I've got my notes on the other. And so as I'm reading, I'm taking notes. Literally, I'm highlighting and taking notes, and I'm formulating my own ideas and opinions. So my book notes and reviews and summaries are way more just kind of my own stupid ideas and less of a summary of the book.
I love that. I recently got a Kindle and I've been taking notes in it, and I find that to be thought provoking. It makes me sit down and like digest the section that like, stop me in my tracks. And I think that's so important because if I'm reading a book, I'll sometimes just flip through and then I'll be like at 3 pages later, what the hell did I just read?
Yeah, when I took notes in Kindle, I would never go back to them. So I've got to set up like I have a Notion, so I'll create a Notion. I use
Huh.
Notion, but you could use the Notes app in anything, Evernote, whatever. So for
Yeah.
a book, I'll create a thing, and so I'll have literally the two side by side panels on there where I'm reading the book
I
here
like
and
that.
flipping over here and taking my notes in a different app, and that's what makes it work for me. So maybe that's
I
helpful
like that.
to people.
No, that's great insight. Ryan Deiss, where can everyone connect with you and follow you?
Twitter is the best place to get my original unfiltered ideas. I do post on LinkedIn, but usually that's me saying something stupid somewhere, and my assistant or my team being like, "You said this, we want to post," and I go, "Okay." I mean, so it's me, but my real time unfiltered um, craziness is on Twitter, and certainly if you hit me up there, if you at me there, so it's just at Ryan Deiss, RyanDeiss. And check out what we're doing at scalable.co, especially if you're an entrepreneur. I think we've got some stuff there. So it's scalable.co, not .com. Wish we could get it. But yeah,
Everyone, follow Ryan on Twitter. Check out scalable.co. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us. It was a lot of fun.
thanks for having me.